So this is a roundup of the best stocks and shares ISAs out there at the moment. We've looked at all the platforms available. We've looked at what they offer, how much they cost, what sort of offers they're giving to new customers, as well as the amounts of money they're paying on cash. I'm going to run through a whole load of analysis that's taken weeks for the team to produce. So if you find it useful, do hit that like button to show your appreciation, and please do subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be going through lots of details on screen, so you can click on the links in the notes so you can look at the articles at your own leisure that are from the Money to the Masses website, and also some tables that nicely summarize the data that we've managed to pull out, particularly in relation to past performance on some of those managed ISAs that are out there. So I'm going to jump straight across to the first thing I think people want to bear in mind when they're looking at ISAs for this tax year is the offers that exist. There are lots of offers available out there. This is very unusual. In the past years, we didn't get offers for new customers on stocks and shares ISAs. Now they're prevalent. So if you are thinking about taking out a stocks and shares ISA, then make sure you look at the article on the Money to the Masses website, which you can see on screen at the moment. It runs through all the different offers that are available. You can see there are offers from all sorts of companies like Wealthify, Money Farm, Interactive Investor, Free Trade, Invest Engine. They all change, and so do make sure you bookmark this particular article so you can go back and check it in the future. Now, the offers do range in their style. Some of them will give you cashback, some of them will give you discounts in fees, and some might even discount FX fees. And we're talking about trading platforms there in particular. So that will interest people who want to buy US shares, for example. So bear that in mind, because that will make a big difference to which platforms might be more attractive to you. Don't forget, you can also open up more than one stocks and shares ISA in a given tax year now. The rules have changed. So if you do open up more than one ISA, you can take advantage of more than one offer, but you can't exceed that £20,000 allowance across the stocks and shares ISAs that you contribute to in a given tax year. With that out of the way, one of the big things you're going to be focusing on if you're looking at the stocks and shares ISA is the cost of it. So the cost will depend on what you're planning on investing in. So if you want to, for example, have a stocks and shares ISA where all the investments are chosen for you, you will want something like a managed ISA solution. Some people call them robo-advisors. If you want to invest in ETFs, you'll want a platform that is cost effective for ETF investing. If you want to invest in things other than ETFs, you might want to invest in unit trusts, investment trusts. You need a platform that offers all of those things. You might want to buy shares directly. So if you want to invest in shares, there are platforms that won't give you access to shares, or some platforms that will have a very limited number. Maybe you are somebody new who wants to have a bit of everything. There are platforms out there that will suit you. Now, I'm sharing on screen here an article on the Money to the Masses website called The Cheapest Stocks and Shares ISAs in 2025, and we've analysed the pricing structures of all the platforms out there depending on what you're investing in. If you jump straight down to the first table, you can see the first one we looked at is managed stocks and shares ISA. So I'll deal with that first of all. These are things like robo-advisors, so Moneybox, Nutmeg, Wealthify, those sorts of management companies. Now, what we've done is looked at what it would typically cost depending on the size of portfolio. So if we focus on the £20,000 column there, because that after all is the annual ISA allowance, you can see the cost typically range from about £120 a year all the way up to about over £300. Now, the cheapest options there are things like the Money Farm fixed portfolio. Now, these portfolios will be fixed allocation. They're not actively managed, so the allocation is into low cost investments, typically ETFs. The ones that cost a little bit more start to be managed. So you can see Nutmeg have a range of options there. The fully managed option is £196 a year. The takeaway from it is that if you're paying somewhere in the ballpark £150 a year for the overall charge of the managed solution, then that probably is about fair for the market. Now, these don't take into account the underlying investments, so there will be small charges for the ETFs, etc., that build the portfolios, but they won't be excessive, but you do have to bear them in mind. Now, I must stress that we have reviews of all of the platforms on the Money to the Masses website. You can find links to those in the notes of this particular video. So that means Nutmeg, Money Farm, or even things like Interactive Investor and Hargreaves Lansdown, which we will come come on to. Now, of course, if you're looking at these portfolios, cost is one thing, but performance is another. Now, I must stress that past performance isn't a guide to future returns and nothing is guaranteed, but we did analyse the performance of the major managed portfolio solutions out there. Again, this took a lot of work to analyse all of the performance figures, and the article again is linked to in the notes of the video. If I scroll straight down, you can see that we've analysed the performance going back to 2020 and looked at the annualised rates of return for different portfolios run by the main robo-advisors out there. Now, of course, there are different portfolios run by these different companies. Not all of them are on there, but they have different risk profiles. So it's important if you're comparing portfolios, you compare like with like. So I've listed the equity exposure of each of the different portfolios available out there, so you can see which are comparable. So therefore you can look at the performance with one mind on how much risk they are taking. And we've also put the platform fees there as well. So that's the cost without the underlying investments included. Now, we have included Vanguard's life strategy fund in there as a benchmark, really. They do have their own managed solutions, but there isn't the track record that these portfolios have. The other thing to bear in mind is that Vanguard have increased their fees on their product. So when you're talking about the platform fee, if you invest directly via Vanguard Investor, again, I'll come on to that later. Their managed solution, however, hasn't had the hike. Looking at the portfolios there, you can see that actually Money Farm have done pretty well in terms of their performance when you're looking at their peer groups and the annualized rate of return over 5 years. And if we scroll down, you can see the rest of them as well. Now, you can see that the table does also give you the performance in individual years, so it gives you some context as to how those returns have been achieved. Now, as I've mentioned, you can click through to the analysis yourself, and bear in mind, just because Money Farm have performed well in recent times doesn't guarantee they will do in the future. Now, I want to jump back to the self-invested ISA comparison when we're looking at costs. So for people who want to pick and choose their own investments and don't want them managed by a professional. So jumping back to that stocks and shares ISA article earlier on that compares costs, this table now shows you what the cost would be assuming 10 fund switches a year and you invested in unit trust. That's a pretty fair assumption in my opinion. Now, we are looking not at the robo-advisors anymore, we're looking at the big names, the platforms out there that give you a range of options. So we're talking about AJ Bell, Charles Stanley, Fidelity, Hargreaves Lansdown, Interactive Investor, etc. Now, if you look at the £20,000 portfolio column, again, that's obviously the ISA allowance, you can see the range is typically from £65 a year up to probably about 70 to 80s where most of them lie. Anything above that is bordering on expensive. Now, for the smaller portfolios, Hargreaves Lansdown is now actually pretty cost effective because they charge a percentage fee, which is based upon the size of your portfolio. But as your portfolio gets bigger and you head up towards the levels of £100,000, for example, they become a much more expensive option. Now, the confusing thing is, I could sit here and tell you about all the different charging structures on all of these different platforms. We have reviews that do that. And again, we'll put links to those in the notes of this video. But what we're doing here is taking into account all of those different charges that these platforms levy. They have different charging structures. Some do a fixed fee, some do a percentage fee based upon the assets you have with them. Some will have trading fees, some won't have trading fees, and this is just based on unit trust at the moment. So you can see that Interactive Investor, they have a fixed charging fee. So think of it a bit like your subscription to Netflix. It's a fixed monthly fee that doesn't go up even if you put more money with them. Unlike Hargreaves Lansdown, the more money you have, the more you are charged. So with Interactive Investor, they become very cost effective once you get above that £50,000 level. AJ Bell are also cost effective, although the more fund switches you do, the more it will cost because they do have that £1.50 per transaction charge. Hargreaves Lansdown, Fidelity don't charge anything for making fund switches. Interactive Investor, they can stack up if you start making fund switches with them because again, they do charge for fund switches even on unit trust. So this comparison is really if you are just buying and holding, which most people do. iWeb, you can see there, are very cheap. It can cost as little as £50 a year to be invested with them. All the figures I'm quoting are annual figures. Vanguard is an interesting one. It was a darling of people who were getting into investing. Say you wanted the life strategy funds, which are incredibly popular, but they now levy a £4 a month fee for investors into their self-managed ISA. So that means it becomes more cost effective to buy life strategy funds with other platforms. So for example, at the lower levels, it can be Hargreaves Lansdown, but at the higher end, once you get to £96,000, then investing with Interactive Investor will always be cheaper if you want the life strategy funds. So moving on to people who want an ISA that can invest in shares, investment trusts and ETFs. Again, we've done a cost analysis you can see on screen. The amount you'll pay a year will vary depending on what you're doing. Now, if you base it purely on cost and assuming those 20 trades a year for £20,000 on all of these platforms, they broadly range from about £100 up to about £220 a year to invest, assuming 20 trades a year. The problem is different platforms charge different amounts for trading, and some charge platform fees every year and some don't. So when we're combining those costs, this is how we get to this approximation of what it's going to cost you. The issue is you've got to decide what you're investing in. If you just want ETFs, Invest Engine, it won't cost you anything to invest with them in terms of a platform fee, and also they don't charge anything to trade. But you can't buy investment trusts, you can't buy unit trusts, you can't buy direct shares, so it's very limited. If you want to trade in shares, you might look at, for example, Trading 212 or Free Trade. But while they don't charge anything to trade, Free Trade, there is a cost for having an ISA. You can see it equates to about £60 a year minimum, whereas Trading 212 don't charge anything, but they do levy other charges you have to be mindful of, for example, when you do top up your account. So all of these things are in the reviews, but this gives you an overview. Now, before I get into a couple of scenarios, the other thing to be mindful of is the interest that you get paid by platforms when it's not invested. Now, this varies massively, and it would also influence your choice of which is best for you. Now, on screen is an article where we've analysed how much interest different platforms will pay. Now, the heat map on screen shows you the rate of interest that you'll be paid by different platforms. At the time of making this video, it ranges from nothing, that's iWeb, up to 4.58%, which is from AJ Bell Doddle. Now, Doddle is AJ Bell's app for investing. It's aimed at people who want a little bit of everything. So they might want to do a bit of ETF investing, or maybe buy some shares, invest in something like Vanguard's life strategy funds. They've got a few of those, and they have some themed portfolios as well. And it's run within an app. So it's aimed at people who want a little bit of everything and maybe beginner investors. And it is a good catch-all option. And they also pay a very good level on cash. So be mindful, these rates do change as the Bank of England base rate tends to change. So these will come down over time, but you might want to be mindful of that, particularly if you are going to be holding money uninvested for periods of time. So that is a roundup of the best stocks and shares ISAs in the UK right now. If I was looking to trade regularly, it would definitely be Free Trade and Trading 212 I would look at. FX fees on Trading 212 are particularly attractive. If I was going for a managed ISA, I'd be choosing between, more than likely, Money Farm, Wealthify and Nutmeg. If I wanted something, I was just beginning investing and I wanted to access a bit of everything, so a bit of shares, maybe a little bit of Vanguard's life strategy, maybe I might want to pick the odd ETF or a managed fund, then I think AJ Bell Doddle is a great choice for people who are just getting into investing, maybe for those people who just want something a little bit app-based. If I'm looking to build a very large portfolio over time with a wide range of different investment options, then I think you've got to look at AJ Bell's main platform, but also Interactive Investor, because they become very cost effective because they have that fixed fee model. The more money you have with them, effectively, the better value they become. If you're just wanting to build a portfolio of ETFs, then probably Invest Engine would be one I would be looking at. But you might disagree, so please leave a comment beneath this video with your own view, which you think is the best stocks and shares ISA for you and why.